Hello my friends, hope you are well. Today I've got quite a quick but fun little build for you, whipping up a wasteland scene using an old miniature and one that I've made from scratch. Let's get into it.
Swamp Rat Miniatures.
So I'd been looking through some of my older miniatures recently, and this guy from a Wasteland Warfare box was really intriguing me for some reason. There's nothing especially interesting about him on his own, but at least 17 of my neurons were firing and conjuring a strong image of him as a trader, leading the pack brahmin through the wastes in true Fallout style. Usually I like to save my older miniatures so I can see how I've progressed over time, but I genuinely couldn't remember the last time I even looked at this guy. He was more unseen than a positive balance in my bank account, so it felt right to give him a new lease of life and get him ready to be repainted for his new home. And for his bovine brahmin companion, which is a two-headed mutated cow from the Fallout universe and also an accurate way to describe my mum, I did think about just buying one, but that felt too easy, and £26 for just 2 miniatures would have done nothing good for my previously mentioned bank balance. So instead I decided to try my hand at sculpting one from scratch, and after creating a basic structure from wire, tin foil and hot glue, I started layering up my green stuff and milliput mixture to add in all the details. The first layer is more or less just to cover up the weird skeleton shape and add a bit of extra heft, and you can see that I decided to have one brahmin head pointing up in the air, letting out an almighty moo because she's pissed off and just wants to wallow in her nuclear pit, and the other one will just have their head in a more neutral pose because they're a bit fed up with Sheila's tantrums and just want to get the job done. The next layer of greeny putting is a bit more involved, and this is where the majority of the broad detail work is completed. I make a start with the heads, trying to make those look a bit more like cows and a bit less like weird camel hybrid creatures, then add some tufts of hair from the shoulders to the heads to create a nice humpy ridge, which is also the name of the location where I lost my. I padded out each of the legs so they look thick enough to handle the extra weight of the trader's goods, and added an indiscriminate blob shape that would form the udders later. For the horns, I glued on a couple of little balls, stretching them out into a more horny shape, then did something similar for the hooves, making sure to split them on the front, because we are all about realism in the land of nuclear enhanced two-headed cows. I shaped some little ears and added those onto the sides of each head, which was a massive pain in the ass because they were so delicate and fiddly, then added some of those milk squirting sausage appendage things onto the udders, which I later realised were actually just called teats. But yeah, the final addition in the second phase of sculpting was a really quick and easy set of harnesses and a saddle to attach the mercantile goods, and once it had time to cure, this is what we had. Looking a bit closer to what we want, but way too smooth skinned at this point.
Hey, smooth skin.
So for the third and final layer, I'm rectifying this smooth skin by attaching little blobs of green stuff that I stretch out and squish about with a sculpting tool, just looking to make it as bumpy and as gross as possible. And I did this on most of the visible areas, including the faces, which did end up making my brahmin a little bit more chunky than I wanted, but I was relatively happy with how it was looking, and it was too late to do anything about it anyway, so f*** it. Now, of course, this is supposed to be a pack brahmin, which is basically the deliverer of the nuclear wasteland, or the deliver-moo if you will. So I got to work equipping her with the various tradable goods and junk you might expect to see in a place like this. The barrel was the main star of the show, but I also used a bunch of wooden scraps and leftover greebles and other kits, finishing it off with an AK because
I just think they're neat.
I wrapped some lengths of chain around everything to secure it in place, and did the same for this wheel on the back using a couple of pieces of wire. So here is our finished brahmin, looking pretty good if I say so. Like I said, it's a bit more chunky and actually a bit more derpy than I'd hoped, but for a lovingly hand-sculpted miniature, I can't complain too much. I would have been happy if it even faintly resembled a brahmin from the game, so yeah, this is good for me. On to our trader. I thought it'd be cool to have this guy yanking on a rope to pull the brahmin from a pit of radioactive waste, which of course meant a bit of reposing for our existing miniature, so after first turning him into the guy from that song One by Metallica, I began reassembling his limbs into a pose that would look a bit more natural tugging away on the rope. I glued the pieces into place roughly first, drilling out holes into the hands to thread the rope through later, and then filled all the gaps with a bit of green stuff to smooth everything over and give those joints a bit of extra strength. This looked like a way smoother process on video than it actually was in real life, but I lined him up with some wire on the brahmin to act as the rope for tugging on, and I could see we were on track, so I could make a start on the terrain for the diorama itself. And it was a really simple process for this one. I started with a mostly circular base that I'd whipped up off camera, then built up a bit of elevation around the edges using some XPS foam. This foam would allow me to attach some rocky bits in the moment, but before I do that, I carved a recess into the ground here to act as the pit that will gather the nuclear goo leaking down from the rock face. For the rocky bits I just mentioned, I used a ton of little scraps of cork sheeting to create some layers of rock face up the sides of the foam, and I've said it before, but I'll say it again at least 1,000 times more. It's always worth saving your scraps of material like this from other builds, as they're so handy for stuff like this where you'd only end up tearing into your fresh sheets anyway. I thought that adding a dead tree into the mix could give the diorama a slightly more interesting profile, so I made one in my usual manner of wire twisting, shoved it down at the back here, and covered it with some hot glue to bulk out the trunk. Then, to help these rocky areas feel a bit more natural and unified, I squirt on a bit of Daddy's special sauce and use this to attach a variety of rocks, placing some larger ones quite deliberately, then sprinkling on some smaller ones and a mixture of fine gravelly sandy stuff to help blend everything together a bit more. I sloshed on some more indiscriminate white fluids to help seal everything in, and covered the remaining areas of exposed foam with my homemade mud mixture. As I said, a really quick and simple process for the scenery today, and while that was drying, I could paint up our miniatures. I went for quite a standard paint job for these guys, first giving them a kind of slap chop zenithal hybrid dry brush treatment to get them started, and I've been doing this for almost all my paint jobs recently, as it's a really good way of getting colours to pop a bit more without having to venture in my back garden to use spray paint instead. You know, whatever involves me peeling my butt out of the chair the least is my preferred choice, but it's a bonus that it looks good too. But anyway, I gave the brahmin skin a kind of fleshy pink colour like they have in the game, then just did an assortment of random colours for the items on its back. I followed this with a fleshy wash and used some streaking grime on top to get everything looking a bit more battered up and grimy like we'd expect to see in the wasteland. And actually I've been on a bit of a streaking grime kick recently. A lot of the time I'll try to avoid relying on it too much, as it is a bit cheaty I suppose, you know. Painting purists would be like, oh no, you should learn to paint grimy, grim, dark, dirty old geese without it. But I'm like, nah, piss off, because I love it. So yeah, maybe my streaking grime use is related to star signs or moon cycles or something, and you'll see less of it when my Saturn is rising or my gibbous is waning, but for now it's out and about like a trout, and I have no idea what I'm talking about at this point, so moving on swiftly. I had a lot of fun painting this brahmin, and I think I was able to get it looking fairly similar to the colour schemes of the in-game versions, so I was pretty happy with that, and just reminding myself that this literally started as some wire, tin foil, glue and a few blobs of green stuff felt really good, as I was now looking at something that fairly closely resembled a creature from my favourite game series. I've been really enjoying trying to sculpt different miniatures recently, and even though this one is super derpy, it was really rewarding to have made her by hand. And since I seem to be on a steady ramble at this point in the video, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone who's been watching my videos and commenting and subscribing and showing support recently. I've gone past 5k subscribers now, which honestly feels crazy. I know not everyone watches every single video I do, but just knowing that at some point 5,000 separate people enjoyed one of my videos enough to click subscribe feels really good, and it's really humbling too. I started this channel originally just to have some fun and share some of my creations, give myself something to do in the evenings, and I wasn't really sure where I wanted it to go, but for me it's turned into something a bit deeper than that now, and I've loved being able to connect with people with similar interests through the videos I make, so I'm really grateful for everyone on here and the support they give. I've got a ton more projects and ideas I want to put into videos in the future, so I'm definitely here for the long run. But if you've got any builds or kit bashes or whatever you'd like to see me attempt, then definitely let me know, as I'd be quite interested to take on some different challenges that I wouldn't necessarily think of myself. So yeah, again, massive thank you to everyone. I'm really grateful for the people that watch my videos, and since these miniatures are now finished, I'll stop rambling and finish this build off. Now, with your expert sleuthing skills, I'm sure you will have all deduced that the last stage is painting up the terrain for the diorama, and this was equally as simple as the build was, so I started by overbrushing a few layers onto the dark grey primer I did, using a pale grey and then mixing in some yellow ochre, some sienna and some browns just to build up quite a natural varied base coat. I also gave the tree a quick base coating with some brown too, then brought a whole bunch of washes into the mix. I was using these to get quite a varied mishmash of different coloured hues into the rock faces, even deciding to chuck some blue, red and purple ones into the mix today, and I tried to concentrate these stronger ones where I wanted the nuclear waste to be seeping through, which was kind of pointless because they weren't really visible once I'd added it, but that's all part of the fun I suppose. And it was looking a bit bonkers at this point, but a couple more coats of dry brushing and some sepia wash helped to bring everything together a bit more, and our rock face now looked a lot more interesting and less one note. For the radioactive waste area, I won't show you too much detail as I've showed this exact process in a tutorial video I did recently, and I'll link that in the description or throw it on the screen or just project it into your brains telepathically for anyone who wants to see that in more detail. But the basic process for the paint job is just building up some pretty bright and radioactive looking colours, and I'm taking these up into the rock face as I want to give the impression it's leaking out up here. I then stick the brahmin down into place and add a few layers of this still water effect stuff to get the gloopy goo effect going on, making sure to let each one dry thoroughly before adding the next. I apply a very thin layer of tesseract glow onto the dried surface of the water, keeping it translucent to give it a more classic nuclear green colour and blend together with the paint we just did. Then I just finish it off with a tiny bit of gloss varnish to bring a bit of that wet sheen back in. Easy peasy. So now all that was left to do was add our little trader into place, attach the wire rope I'd made earlier and give it a little touch up to make it look more, well, ropey, add a few dead grass tufts, and add a very basic glowing effect on the brahmin and around the edges of the goo. Let's see how it came out. And there we have it, monomies, an unhappy little wasteland trader trying to yank his brahmin out a pit of nuclear goo. Why are they in there in the first place, I hear you ask? Maybe they want to wallow, maybe they got bogged down crossing through it, or maybe it's just an act of stubborn bovine defiance against their human. Whatever the reason though, Shelly's clearly pissed off, Sheila's feeling pretty indifferent to it all, and I had a ton of fun making this. It didn't come out as crisp as I'd imagined in my head, as is often the case, and there's definitely a bunch of areas I'd like to improve for the future, like the glow effect is not amazing to be honest, and the trader blends in a bit more with the background than I'd like, but for it being a relatively quick and simple build, I do like how it's come out overall. And this was another fun little venture into the wastelands of the Fallout universe, but if you want to see what I'm making next time, then make sure to subscribe or leave a comment down below if there's something you'd like to see me attempt. As I said earlier, thank you so much to everyone who's been watching and supporting me recently. Maybe we'll get to 10k in the future, but regardless, I love you all, and I have been your friendly neighborhood swamp rat, and I will see you very soon in another video. See ya.